how it's done. Start working your way around. Put it down. You just keep walking around like that. So each of the trades, the carpenter trades, are going to have tools that could be unique to their trade. And coopers were one of them. I don't have a wheel with me. I forgot to pick one up. But wheelwrights were a very common trade. And the census records for Columbia and for Coloma, both of them list several wheelwrights. Coloma in 1850. How many carpenters do you think would be show up? They actually had a census in 1850. Another California census in 1852, and then another United States one in 1860. But in 1850, early in the gold rush, Coloma is about a little over 600 citizens here in town. Now you would think it's bigger in 1850, but that's just the citizens in town. Coloma's still at this time not a very big town. Placerville is starting to grow, and Placerville is going to become 5,000 people in just a couple of years. So Coloma never really gets very big, but there's plenty of people around and plenty of people coming through Coloma. But in 1850, it's 600 people. How many carpenters do you think are around at that time? Guesses? Whoa, that's good. You've either been reading or
25.
Well, just to find a gentleman out here that can read is wonderful.
Can't read, sir. Thank you.
22 carpenters, plus one wheelwright, I think a couple wheelwrights, and so it's about 25. You know, and that's how many they recorded, so there might be a couple more.
Now, James Marshall was a carpenter, so did he list that as his profession when he came out, or did he list it as the millwright, or what was he listed
Carpenter.
as? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, great question. And he's in the census, and obviously the most famous carpenter in the entire gold rush. Because name another carpenter in the gold rush.
Yeah.
No idea. There are plenty, obviously, but 22 recorded as carpenters. In 1860, Coloma is a little over 400 people now, a little smaller. And by this time, as Bill mentioned, people are discovering this gold and more of it in other parts of the state. In 1860, those 6 carpenters, every one of them have their wives with them, and all but one have children. So obviously they've started to settle into an area. They aren't the kind of carpenter that will move around like the ones in 1850, because in 1852, almost none of those names that were in 1850 show up in 1852.
Really?
They've gone somewhere else, and there's new carpenters taking their place. One of the first things that a carpenter is going to do, obviously he's going to use the tools that he's brought with him. You know, all the chisels, the hammers, and all the sorts of planes and things like that traditional woodworkers use today. Tools have not changed that much. One of the things that he is not going to bring with him is a shaving horse. Now, if you've not seen one of these are pretty cool instruments. But they're big enough and heavy enough that a carpenter's not going to carry this around. He's going to set up shop, and this will be one of the first things he makes. He's going to find a tree somewhere and make this almost immediately. And that's because it's a pretty critical tool for many of the things that he's going to be working on. For instance, you see a couple planks here. So I've got an order to make a couple of crude little benches for a couple of miners for their cabin. They don't want to spend time making it, but they want something that's a little more comfortable, but they don't want to spend a lot of money. So we got some planks from the mill sawn up, and got some stock from some pine to make some legs. And so I'm going to work these into some crude legs. You see one, I think, kind of getting there. And I'll drill some holes, cut this a little short, and make a couple little benches for them. But what a carpenter would be trying to do, he's got to work this stock from this to something round. And that's where the shaving horse comes in. Now why is it called the shaving horse? Yeah. And These are called draw knives if you've not seen one before. A knife because it's got a sharp blade, really sharp. This is knife sharp. And called a draw knife because you're drawing it towards you when you're working with it. The advantage of this is that working this with one hand is not too productive. Putting it on a vise like that, not too helpful. The table rocks all over the place. I need something really firm to hold this piece of wood to work in. And that's where this comes in. This top part is one of the key parts. It's called a dumb head. I enjoy that term with the kids because I knew at least one in high school. So I can move the work in and out here. When I push my foot on the pedal here, this is locked in. I can't move this at all. Release it. It's hinged right here to move out of my way so I can move it in and out easily and then lock it right in place. Can't move it. This is a tool that's been around for probably thousands of years. It was often used in the Middle Ages. You see it in a lot of drawings, and it's probably a lot older than that. But this allows me to take the square work with the draw knife and start working down these corners to make them round. Just like that. I know some people have asked, well, don't you worry about cutting yourself right here? And not really. After you get the hang of it, you're not really getting anywhere near. But if I have something right at the end, maybe a little delicate part I want to work on, obviously this is not going to be a delicate piece of work, but if I did have a finer piece of furniture, I have a little board that I put in right there. And now I can get up close to the work and get right in there if I need to. But most of the time I don't need it. So you can see, carpenters just have all sorts of things that they use or make to get to the work. So once I get this down to something that's rough, where I want it to be, for a shape, not really there yet, but it's close enough. And I'm going to go to another tool to get to the fine work. What are these called again?
Spoke shave? I don't know, I
Pardon?
have one called spoke shave.
Spoke shave, thank you. Spoke shave used traditionally by a wheelwright on the spokes for the wheel, and he would make spokes often the same way. Take a square stock, start working it into something circular, and then he's going to use this to shave down and make it very smooth. It's got a nice little sharp blade right there. It's kind of a small draw knife, if you will. But you can do very, very nice work with that and make it nice and smooth. And one of the nice things about traditional woodworking, when you're using planes and knives like this, you can actually get a smoother surface than a modern woodworker can with sandpaper. If you have well sharpened planes, you can make it smoother than today with the modern stuff. They didn't have any sandpaper back then. They had some rough materials that they could use and did occasionally, but mostly it was using the planes and devices like this.
Do you use lathes at all?
Hey, it's funny you should mention that. This time next year I'm hoping to have a treadle lathe out.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Lathes have been around since the Middle Ages too. Obviously hand powered. They had spring lathes, which is, I wish I could show you a picture or something here, but basically you have a, maybe even just a tree that's been bent over, and a string from that down to the end of your work, and you've got a little pedal that you can work that, and the spring of that tree will allow your work to rotate one way, then goes back the other way, like that. And that's how the treadle lathe works too. So I'm hoping to build one and have out here, because those were in use. Rather quickly, the Carpenters, and I'm glad you mentioned that, will go to power lathes though. They are available in the carpenter shop in just a few years after the gold rush starts. You know, often run by water power, but as the steam engines start coming in, they actually have steam power to run these things too. But that would be for a big shop. But there were, after the gold rush started in a few years, some of these shops started getting pretty big. You know, they would get some partners in there and they would have apprentices, And so you could have a shop that could have 15 people in there, and they would have those kind of power lathes. But not this carpenter, not yet. But that gives you a little sense of what carpentry was like once they get wood from the mill here, and make it into some of the miners' tools, make it into the structures and homes and shops that they're using, as well as the big mining works. And the work doesn't end even when the mining goes underground. Well, you have timbers that have to be made by the mill, but also by carpenters to make those mines safe too for men to work. So it's a fun activity that's part of the gold rush to make those gold miners successful.